appreciate that.
All right, I think we are live. Welcome everybody back to Sigmar's Symposium. This will be the third episode of the podcast, and today we have a very special guest, Tonitrus. So, Tonitrus, if you would like to introduce yourself, go right ahead.
Greetings, everyone. Thank you, brother. It's a pleasure to be on your show. My name is Tonitrus. Was born and raised in Europe. I'm a very Southern European of Spanish descent. I ended up traveling and living in many different spaces, many different places all over Europe. Also a little bit in the United States. And when I was adult, I started traveling into Latin America, and that's when I got awakened to what's going on in the world. I got this bigger picture, and quickly I learned that there are people who fully align with my worldview that was created organically through the life experience, and those people are National Socialists, and here I am.
Sorry, I was muted. Yeah, that's great to hear, Tonitrus. So I brought you on today because I wanted to discuss Vanguardism. And what a vanguard is that it's a group of people leading the way in new developments or ideas for a movement. So Jonathan Bowden, who's probably my favorite right-wing nationalist, I prefer the term nationalist. So my favorite nationalist orator of recent times, he talked about the need for a vanguard and how we as nationalists, National Socialists, we have to be the vanguard because the center right will not. So what do you think about the idea that, how should I phrase this? That the center right won't do anything, and if we're going to get real political change in the West, then it has to come from the nationalists or National Socialists in our case.
Well, the center right consists of gatekeepers who are paid shills by the system, and people who are just naturally cowards and will never dare to speak against the dogmas that are destroying us, and they will always just make sure that people are not too radical. Right? It's pretty much their main task. They will never really go against the insane ideas that are being spawned by the system. So I think that's the reason number one of why they will never really play any role in what you're talking about. But also, we have to remember that the system has a tendency to attack us from every single angle, and they have many different categories covered. So it's not like we can only expect attack from one side, right? It's a popular misconception that the only vector of attack is coming from the left. Therefore, we just have to put a big magical wall, shield ourselves from the left, and then we are going to be protected and good because everything that is on the right is organic and is going to help us, and surely it's motivated by goodwill. That's not the case at all. Obviously, on the right wing, there's far more problematic individuals and ideas than one can possibly imagine. And because artificially the political scene was pushed so far into the extreme left, now we have this fake notion that anything that is against the left, right, the so-called wokeism, is somehow organic and is common sense, and we should just all unite, and that's going to work out, and we are capable of doing something. That's probably the main misconception of modern politics. Obviously, they have already installed many fake actors on the right, and also a lot of those ideas on the right are specifically catered to people like us. You know, they will tell us a lot of rightful things, and they will appeal to us with many facts. But then in that critical moment, they will tell us that 5-10% of lies that is the most important to the system, right? So we can see that with an example of Alex Jones, for instance, right? The guy obviously has talked about many important issues, and most definitely he was right about many things, like fluoride in the water. But when it comes to pointing out who is the actual source of that, who is the enemy, he will purposely derail us, right, and tell us that, oh, it's the Chicoms, it's the Nazis, it's the globalists, but not the Jews.
Absolutely. It was the original National Socialist, in fact, who said that the center right is a bigger danger to them than the left was in their time, because the center right, they're gatekeepers, they're sheepdogs, they keep people away from the truth because they're just perpetuating this Jewish system. And when I think of people like this, I think of people like Ben Shapiro, James Lindsay, Jordan Peterson, the Babylon Bee, outlets like that, where sure, they'll talk about like trans people being a problem, and we'll agree with that, but they'll never talk about Israel being a problem, and they'll never talk about the race question either. So the third rails, I guess you could say, are the Jews and then racial problems.
Yeah, absolutely, you're right. And transsexuality is such a low-hanging fruit. You're telling us that there are only two genders? Wow, that you're so radical, you're so based. I think that we should pass beyond those most obvious truths and just automatically put someone, anyone who is going against those most obvious facts, put them in an insane camp if they really believe in that, or which is more likely, into that subversive camp, right? Someone who is just purposely trying to push that very dangerous and anti-human narrative, and thus destroy our societies with that, and our people. But just because you are going against it, that doesn't mean anything at all. And especially if you're not really keen on all the other issues, and you never talk about the source. So right now, just recently, like maybe in a couple of like past 2 years, it became popular for this, let's say, center right wing environment to talk about the dangers of the immigration, specifically Muslims. They are targeting Muslims because it's a very convenient path to omit the racial aspect of it, right? So they are presenting in such a way that it's the Islam that creates radicals, and it's the Islam that creates people that are dangerous to our civilization, rather than just talking about the race, right, and the differences between IQ and things like that. And I've noticed that whoever started talking about it really hard, and they are actually using pretty radical language. They will use some slurs to describe those people, specifically Muslims right now. Usually they will not be keen on any other issue, and they will always just concentrate on the issue itself, but never talk about the source.
Absolutely. And when we're talking about characters like this, one that instantly comes to mind is Tommy Robinson from Britain. So Tommy Robinson, he's an opponent of mass migration, particularly from Muslims, but he does it on this pro-Israel, through a pro-Israel lens. We can't bring them here because they're anti-Semitic. And he says stuff like Israel is trying to protect us from these people, and just utter garbage like those takes. He won't mention that it was Jews who brought them into our countries in the first place. So I kind of want to segue now to the state of America versus the state of Europe. And as a European, you'll be able to provide some insight for me and my American listeners. So, who would you say is in a worse situation, the United States or Europe?
I'll say definitely Europe, just because we don't have freedom of speech like you guys do. We don't have Second Amendment. We don't have First Amendment. Second Amendment, obviously, in regards to guns, right? We don't have really that gun culture either. There are some countries that are better than others. Obviously, Europe is more diverse than United States, even though European Union is trying to change that and make it very evenly miserable. Switzerland, for instance, is one of those countries that is really good on guns. Usually, people are very armed there. But then there's, for instance, countries like Poland, which is completely disarmed. So there's many issues in Europe that you guys still don't have in the United States. And also, one very important fact to remember is that Europe is divided heavily into different nations, right? So continental Europe is pretty much of the size of United States, but it consists of many different nations, many different countries, so that each speak their own language. And that is heavily used. That is being heavily used against us by injecting into every nationalism this sentiment against your own neighbors, right? Bringing up some things from the past, and if you want to be a nationalist in Spain, you have to hate this country and that country, things like that, which essentially makes it more difficult to achieve that unity. That is definitely far easier to do in United States, just because it's one country, it's one nation, right? It's just more practical this way.
Yes, this is the problem of petty nationalism, as some people call it, where you love your own country, but you don't love your race as a whole. And then that causes you to attack and malign your fellow European brothers. So that's a very important problem to mention. Here in America, we don't have this concept of the nation like Europeans do, and it's one of our deficiencies. We have this idea that everyone can come to America, and America is a melting pot, was created by that idea was created by a Jew, unsurprisingly. So we've really lost this idea of America being for white people, for Anglo-Saxons, and then later people like the Germans and the Irish. So I guess the next question I wanted to ask you is, going back to Vanguardism, what platforms do we have a significant presence on as nationalists? Maybe this is different across the world. I don't really think so. I think we're all kind of on the same platforms, no matter our countries. But what would you say are the most important platforms for nationalists to be on?
By platforms, do you mean internet?
Sorry, social media platforms and content platforms.
Well, for now, I think it's Telegram, but just recently I learned about Nostr, Nostr. My understanding is that it's an equivalent of Twitter. And it seems like this website is very well designed, it's very secure, focused on privacy, and also seems like it will be something that would allow us to communicate with each other in the near future if they are going to nuke us out from the other platforms, right? Obviously, also for now, X, formerly Twitter, is a very important platform to be on, just because of that relatively freedom of speech, right, that was given by Elon Musk. We don't know how long we will be able to enjoy it. Obviously, it's not really full freedom of speech. There are a lot of actions being placed against our people, against our views. We are being constantly shadow banned. Many of our people are being just removed from the platform altogether. So it is still problematic, but not to a similar extent like other platforms. And compared to what it was during the so-called COVID era, right? There's no comparison. So I think for now it is important to have your presence on X, especially for anyone who is looking to enter the battlefield and to try to reach out the masses and to counter that mainstream narrative, right? There is a lot of successes actually being achieved for our people on X. We were able to ratio Elon Musk himself many times in regards to the most important issues like Israel and the Jewish control of America. So it's a lot of things are possible right now on X, and I think that's probably the mainstream platform number one.
Totally. And I would say I want to use this as an opportunity to white pill people, because 4 years ago, in 2020, during that era, nobody was talking about the Jews. Nobody was talking about race. We had the COVID restrictions, which varied from country to country, and in my situation, from state to state. But we've made such an advance over the past 4 years, to the point where now you can go on Twitter and you can see stuff like people talking about who was responsible for getting the U.S. involved in both world wars, and who was responsible for that melting pot myth that I mentioned earlier. So I would agree that X is a very important platform. Telegram, I've heard it's more secure, but I've also heard people say that there are some ways that undesirable actors can get in there. I have one. I don't really use it as often as I should, though. But I'm very interested in this. What did you call it? NOS?
Nostr. Yeah, NOSTR.
I'll have to look into that, because that sounds very interesting. I haven't heard of this project. So I guess moving away from platforms now, we can get into some real, tangible pro-white projects that are going on. As a Vanguard, we'll need to have organizations, movements, institutions, and the like if we want to implement real positive change. So the first of these projects that I want to ask you about, Tonitrus, is National Socialist Network in Australia. So do you have any opinions or off-the-cuff thoughts about them?
When it comes to Anglosphere, I'm not an expert on the politics of Anglosphere. NSN, I believe it's the party that is being led by Thomas Sowell.
Yeah, Thomas Sowell, Joel Davis, those guys.
I have a very positive opinion about Thomas Sowell. I really like what he's doing. I think he is one of the best leadership material out there from what we have at the moment. He is very famous for that, for winning that case against this guerrilla bodyguard, right, that assaulted his friend, and then he just was trying to protect him, and ended up obviously being the villain, portrayed as a villain in the mainstream media. So that was a pretty big case internationally speaking. I think that our people winning those kind of cases is an important milestone. And also the way he presents himself, he's always very clean. He's always very well-dressed, well-spoken. He's very philosophical, very intellectual, which we absolutely need. We cannot be led by buffoons and clowns. Because of that, I think that he has a really strong potential to be either a leader or one of the leaders. When it comes to his party itself, I don't know that much about it. I know that they are organizing those events where they lift in the open air, right? Like they meet somewhere outside and just tribe and train. That is very positive. We obviously need that as well. We cannot allow our people to be out of shape, and it's important to always inspire our brothers to work out and to pump that iron and spar with other people. That's very important.
Absolutely. Everyone needs to be going to the gym. Oh, okay. Sorry, I thought there was an echo. But yes, everyone needs to be going to the gym, and that was actually part of the subject of my last podcast episode. So I'm a huge fan of Thomas Sowell. I'm a huge fan of Joel Davis. I think their main area of expertise is activism and getting the message out there. Like for example, you had that case where a Chinese immigrant poured scalding hot coffee on a baby, then fled back to China. This was in Australia, and the media just didn't report about it until NSN got out in the streets. They were all dressed the same. They had their banners with the slogan "Fuck off, we're full." I'm a huge fan of that slogan as well. And then they made such a loud noise about it that the media ended up accidentally covering it and telling people this happened when the average Australian had no clue that had even gone on. So I definitely think there are things we can learn from NSN. Moving on to another pro-white project I want to talk to you about, which is Orania in South Africa. Orania, I think, is probably the best at building a real-life community with functioning utilities, real-life houses for our people. And they're doing it in South Africa, which is probably the worst-off country out of any of ours. So do you know anything about the Orania project? And if so, what are your thoughts about that?
Yes, I do. Orania is indeed very inspiring. I love the pictures that they are posting. Very white, very wholesome too, right? There's a lot of families. There's a lot of youth that is just very well kept, very healthy, in good shape, and engaged in productive activities. So that's definitely what we need. The community itself is marvelous. I have nothing bad to say about it. However, when it comes to the organization level of Orania, there are a lot of issues. A lot of people are pointing out to the fact that they are dependent on some Jewish organization that is responsible for security, and they are not really well equipped as a community altogether to actually protect themselves from any potential danger. So there are some Jews involved on some organization level when it comes to either security of Orania or the structure itself, and that's very problematic. And thus, I think those people are a little bit oblivious when it comes to the Jewish question. From what I have observed, most of the people involved in this project are overall this Boer community. They rightfully point out to the atrocities being committed by the sub-Saharans in South Africa, but they never really go after the source either, just like many controlled right-wing people, right? Like, for instance, there's this big account on Twitter, Boer, simply named Boer. I don't remember his handle, full handle. That person is reposting a lot of kosher content, like, Jordan Peterstein, things like that. I was very disappointed with it. That indicates that those people really are not either purposely or maybe they're just unwillingly are not aware of the source of the problem. And I think that this is one of the staples of any serious organization or any serious community. We have to be aware of the Jews. We have to install that awareness into our children, into the new generations, and also act accordingly when it comes to building any structure, not allow them in any proximity, not allow them to be responsible for our safety, not rely on them and not trust them. So on that aspect, I think this project has, unfortunately, it seems like it has failed. Hopefully, they can get better in this aspect.
Very interesting. I don't know enough about the actual structure of it to opine on that issue, but I do think it is important to have a cognizance of the Jews and then act accordingly. So, one person who, though, is a big fan of Irania is a guy named Arval. Arval is a content creator and a philosopher who I really admire. And his project in the United States is called Return to the Land. I think this is a great idea. Arval has found a legal loophole because in the United States, it's supposed to be illegal for us to segregate by race where we live. But he has found a way around that with some legalese knowledge, and he's building his own community in the Ozarks. And from what I've seen, it looks like a very beautiful place, some very wholesome and good people down there. I know you said you aren't as familiar with the Anglosphere, but do you know about Return to the Land? And if so, do you have any opinions on it?
And let me make it clear. Not that I'm not familiar with the Anglosphere. I'm just not as well versed as
Sorry, I
the
didn't
other.
mean to imply that. I'm sorry.
So Return to the Land, I think I heard about it, but since you've mentioned the Ozarks, there's one organization that I do know a lot about. It's a project named Ozarkia from the Shield Network. I don't know if they are in any way related to each other.
Muted again. I'm not exactly aware. I've always heard it referred to as Return to the Land. Maybe I could be wrong though.
Maybe those are two completely different projects. I am familiar with the Ozarkia, though. As a matter of fact, I have done interview with Billy Roper, uh, the uh, the founder of the project itself, and it seems like they are dedicated to build an ethno state in that whole encompassing area of the Ozarks. They are organizing people to come there and to protect themselves from, rather protect all those areas from any degeneracy, and they are blocking a lot of projects, like for instance some social housing. I don't know if that was specifically Section 8 housing or some other projects from the government that they wanted, obviously, to flood them with violent demographics, and they successfully blocked that project. So um, that is that, that is essentially what our people need to do, right? We need to block all those hostile ideas from coming from the system.
Absolutely, we need to block the hostile ideas and the hostile basketball Americans, as we've taken to calling them here. Uh, I think the thing about Return to the Land that I just really admire is that they've found a legal loophole. I don't know if it's like this in other countries, but in America since the 1960s, freedom of association has just been illegal now. If you don't want to live next to basketball Americans, that can get you sued, and that's why I think it's so great that Arval with his it's like you have a public a PMA, he calls it, and then everyone buys into the PMA, and that's how they get their land together. Because
What is PMA? Sorry,
what
what is PMA?
public membership? I can't exactly remember. It's been a while since I've looked into it, but I think that's just something that should really inspire us, and maybe if it's applicable in other countries, we can do that too. So the next organization I want to talk about is Patriot Front. Patriot Front is an activist organization here in America, and they're kind of similar to the NSN network, in which they're advocating for a pro-white cause. They're on our side, but they're doing it with American aesthetics. They're trying to play into that we love America. We're not nationalists who hate our nation, which is something that happens in America. There are a lot of Americans who don't like America for what it's done historically. So my question to you, Tonitrus, is: are you aware of Patriot Front, and if so, what are your opinions about them?
Yes, I am. I think that the leader, Thomas Rousseau, is a very solid character. I listened to many of his interviews done by Jake Shields, done by this mainstream guy, Patrick B. David, or whatever his name is. I think he conducts himself very respectfully. He's very well spoken. He's very intellectual. Yet again, very important for our leaders to be very intellectual. Without it, there's just no way for us moving anywhere. And obviously, it's very easy to derail us into the suicide, right? Like those people who are telling us that it's time for a race war. Let's just get on the street and let's just get angry. That's the silliest thing someone can think of. So I think that Thomas Rousseau is a born leader. Very impressive, especially given his age, very young. I believe he's 26. And it seems like he is very keen on organizing people in real life, right? All those events that they do, this is just training for any event in the future that would require such a level of organization. So he is doing God's work. That's definitely very important. One thing that I would disagree with the whole idea of the group would be the avoidance of the racial aspect. I think he tries really hard to portray it as like a patriotic group rather than racial, right? So he's talking about the Americans, and obviously by Americans, every sane person, right? Understands that American is a white person, is a person of European descent. Obviously, we in Europe, oftentimes when we speak with each other and we mention American, we imagine that American of Germanic descent, right? The of the Northern European type. That is essentially what American is. But he is a little bit afraid to go into that racial aspect and to draw a line that the other groups aren't really Americans, right? Like for instance, the so-called Native Americans, the Indians, they never were Americans. They never had the name for the continent. They never created such a political structure. They never had a country. So the America was a creation of the Europeans, and he knows that, and he talks about that. But then I think he doesn't want to draw that line when it comes to the different races, right? That we are Americans, they are not Americans, this kind of a thing. And then also, patriotism itself, I think it's a little bit problematic because it's attachment to the country as a structure, as a political unit, rather than nationalism, which is attachment to your people, right? To the nation, that implies kin, that implies that racial aspect. So I think that nationalism will always trump patriotism, nationalism in its true sense, right? With that attachment to the kin. But overall, I think that Patriot Front is a very interesting project. It's a net positive. Those people are probably saving a lot of youth that otherwise would be dragged into some weird places by the degenerate culture that surrounds them, right? So here they have a role model. Here they have a place where they can train, where they can become someone with inspirations. That is really great. And hopefully they can fulfill that very important spot within the American nation, that they will have organized youth ready to fight for their people, ready to defend their culture, and hopefully they will not be us isolated as Americans tend to be. That, oh, we're just Americans. We know American exceptionalism, right? We don't care about any other country, and hopefully they will be a little bit more racial and also care about other white nations, like obviously all the nations in Europe, Canada, Australia, right, South Africa, whichever white nation there is out there. I think it's important to have that unity on a global scale, just because the enemy itself has infiltrated every single one of our countries. So they are truly the globalists, right? The Jews are the globalists. So I think that the only way for us to successfully defend ourselves is to organize on that global level.
Yeah, I think you really touch on an important point here that I want to delve more into, which is civic nationalism versus ethno-nationalism. We can just substitute the word patriotism for civic nationalism, because for those people, they just love the state. They love their country, but they don't love the people, the biological nation that comprises said state. And I think that's an area where Europe is doing better than America, because, like I said, Europeans have that concept of themselves as a distinct people, whereas in America, we just don't have that. Well, people in our movement understand Europe. Let me go back. People in our movement understand Americans to be people of European ancestry, of Anglo-Germanic, primarily ancestry. But the country at large does not think this way, and that's a very big problem for Americans specifically. The next organization that I want to touch on is called the Old Glory Club. And sticking with that theme of Americana, the Old Glory Club tries to use imagery of America before it was subverted. And we have some very good, competent people in this organization. People like Pete Quinones come to mind, people like Thomas 77. So you have some really good people in this organization. The only criticism I would have of the OGC is that it's very it's very Christian, and if you're not on board with Christianity, then I don't think they would kick you out, but they're certainly not as welcoming to people who may not see Christianity as a potential way forward for white people, or just our religion. So my question for you, Tonitrus, is, are you aware of the OGC, the Old Glory Club? And if so, what is your opinions on them?
I'm not familiar at all, unfortunately.
Have you heard of people like Thomas 77, Pete Quinones?
Okay. No.
Well, we'll move on from them. I think I've said my piece about the Old Glory Club. The next organization I want to talk about is Junge Nationalisten, which is the only German organization I have on the list. So JN, as it's abbreviated, is the activist wing of the Alternative for Deutschland party. And from what I've seen on Twitter is Junge Nationalisten are much more based than the AFD is. They're much more willing to... they're like our guys. Obviously, they can't come out and show the hooked cross in that country for legal reasons. But just looking at their content on Twitter, I get the clue that they're aware of certain problems and they're aware of who caused them. So, Tonitrus, have you heard of Junge Nationalisten? And if so, what is your opinion on them?
Yeah, of course. Being more based than AFD, Alternative for Deutschland, that's really not such a big achievement, given the fact that now they're being run by a lesbian who is married literally to a Sri Lankan.
It's pretty bad.
Yeah. It's really bad. Obviously, AFD itself, it's not all that bad. There are different sectors there. There are some sectors that are really pro-German and aware of all the situation. But I think it's just the way the system works, that if some party is allowed certain growth, they need to rape themselves, right? They need to adopt some of those insanities, and then they need to show how loyal they are to the Jews, and how toothless they are. So that's what's going on with AFD. It's a humiliation process, pretty much the same as what happened on GOP, right? The with GOP on the Republican National Convention, RNC.
Oh God, that.
Yeah, that was a humiliation ritual, letting you know that they are now chosen to be the winners, right? But in order to do that, they need to be toothless and as anti-white as possible and as pro-Jewish as possible. So that's pretty much a very universal phenomena in the politics. When it comes to Junge Nationalisten, I think that they are very promising. There's a lot of young, very intelligent people. I know that one of their main stated goals is to spread awareness about the Jewish problem. They specifically say that Jews are very different than people of European descent, and they are just incompatible with our civilization. Thus, they should not be anywhere near our civilization. And actually, they straight up call them parasites. So they are very, very brave, especially given the climate in Germany, right? How censorial it is, how the system will just go after you if you dare to express those opinions. So they are very impressive. They are very brave. And I think not a lot of people know that, but Junge Nationalisten, they are the kind of like a youth club to Heimat. Heimat is the political party that is a true alternative to AFD. They are Heimat, obviously in German means homeland, right? So they are the true nationalist party of Germany, and they are integral part of each other, or rather, Junge Nationalisten, they are integral part of Heimat.
Absolutely, I agree with everything you said. And it's important just to remember how bad of a situation Germany is in, particularly. Uh, so we can't expect them to be able to speak as freely as ourselves as Americans, because they don't have a First Amendment and they actively have laws that will send them to jail if they question a certain historical event. So they're really pushing the boundaries as much as they can in arguably the worst off or second worst off country in the West. You could make the argument South Africa is worst off, but I'll leave that up to the viewers to decide. So yeah, I definitely have a lot of respect for Junge Nationalisten, just for, and I know personally some members there who absolutely are on our side, who share our views and try to push the Overton window as much as they can, despite all of the obstacles they have that we don't. So while we're on the topic of political parties, I want to discuss a few of the political parties around the West. We mentioned Heimat already, as you pointed out, but you also have the Homeland Party in the UK, which I think is very promising. It seems to be the successor of the BNP, which sadly didn't exist for a period of years, but it seems like Homeland is picking up that slack. So have you heard of the Homeland Party? And if so, what are your thoughts on that?
I am vaguely familiar, unfortunately, not to the point that I would be able to present any valid opinions in here. Like I mentioned, unfortunately, Anglosphere is the sphere of the white world that I'm the least familiar with. So UK is one of the very few European countries that I don't have that much knowledge about.
Well, I came across the Homeland Party from a guy named Zoomer Historian, who is doing great work on YouTube, exposing lies about the Second World War and events surrounding that. So Zoomer Historian is actually how I found that party, and it's much more promising than this reform UK garbage that is that we all know and hate. So if you're a British listener watching, I would definitely get in touch with the Homeland Party and talk to some of those guys because they seem very great.
I
Here
can
in
just confirm.
America, we don't. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh no, sorry. Yeah, I just wanted to quickly inject that I do confirm that Reform Party is controlled opposition.
Yeah, for sure. Here in America, we actually lack a third positionist party. We're stuck in this two-party dynamic, and it looks like it's going to be that way for the foreseeable future. But I know plenty of people who want to change that, like that Cameron fellow on the Backlash podcast. I'm forgetting his last name for some reason, but he's a huge advocate of creating a new party because the Republican Party is just so filled with Zionists. It's dependent on Jewish money, and it seems it's controlled opposition, frankly. So, do you think that it would be possible to even have a third party in America? And if so, what are your reasons why?
Well, I guess have Libertarian Party, right?
Oh,
Which,
no.
by the way, I don't know if you know, but this year's presidential election, they had Chase Oliver, that I think successfully has exposed the libertarianism to the world, what it's truly all about, right? So he was a big proponent of the government telling you how many people you can have on your Thanksgiving dinner. And yet they have an audacity to call themselves, pro-freedom somehow. The guy supports, the drag queen story hour, everything, all the worst things. But when it comes to, that sense of liberty, he feels like the illegal immigrants in here is the sign of liberty because everyone just should travel whenever they feel like, and there should be no borders because that goes against libertarianism. So that kind of shows you how easily libertarianism can be used against us, against our views, and anyone who still feels any attachment to libertarianism, I think it's time to wake up and become a nationalist.
Yeah, libertarianism is an absolute embarrassment. I can't stand it. Frankly, it's just leftism. It's awful. Chase Oliver is just such an embarrassing figure. I'm not a libertarian, so I don't have any connection to the Libertarian Party, and it's just very cringe, as we would say. But I do think it would be nice if we could have a third party, a nationalist third party that isn't in bed with Zionism and the Jews, and that actually advocates for racial issues as opposed to this limp-wristed civic nationalism that we see in the Republican Party. So that's all the question I had about political parties. I wanted to move on to building an intellectual foundation for our vanguard. So the first question I had for this topic, Tonitrus, is about a short list of right-wing thinkers. So who, in your opinion, constitutes the intellectual tradition of the nationalist right? And what ideas do these people contribute?
Well, I think one of the. Well, are you talking about the living people right now, or just?
Oh no, it can be an alive thinker, a dead thinker, just someone who's very important to the strain of right-wing intellectual thought.
I think that the litmus test lies in your position on Adolf Hitler. There's obviously many people that there are many people that are very emotional about this figure, just because it has been demonized by the modern history. And if such is the case, I think it is the best proof that someone is driven by emotions and indoctrination rather than a reason. So obviously that doesn't imply that you have to agree with every decision that he made as a person. It doesn't have to. It doesn't imply that you need to be fully on board when it comes to the politics of the National Socialist Germany. But when it comes to his intellectual side, there should be no doubt that he was the one who laid the foundation of, in modern history at least, to understand the problem of the Jews. Right? He described them in Mein Kampf. There's nothing hateful there. There's no um, calls to violence. He just intellectually lays out the nature of the Jews, how they operate, all the mechanism of the politics. If people would be familiar with that, they wouldn't fall that easily for the traps that they keep falling nowadays for this left and right wing, right? The good Jew and the bad Jew, all this nonsense that we see. So even though I have not read Mein Kampf for a really long time, when I was, I read it very late. Uh, I was never really. Um, it wasn't something that shaped my worldview. Let's put it this way. But when I already had my worldview developed, and I read Mein Kampf, I discovered that pretty much all of the observations that I had from my own life and just knowing personally some of the people that are Jewish and observing the politics and see how privileged they actually are within the system and how easy it is for them to be successful and how tribal they are and how sleazy they are and how just they lie and how it's very natural for them, right, to be this way. Um, then after reading Mein Kampf, I just discovered that it fully aligns with whatever thought I had, right? So whatever I came up independently, Hitler already noticed that 100 years ago, right? And I think if more people would read that, they would save themselves all the trouble of analyzing individually the situation. Obviously, we don't have much time left, so I think it's important for people to read that literature. But obviously, we can go further into the history and then find a lot of Roman people, right? Roman writers that will also talk about the same issue, right? So it just shows us how deep this problem goes. Like Tacitus, for instance, right? He was noticing a lot of things. He was a big noticer of the times. And the Roman Empire, obviously, I may be biased in here just because I come from the parts of Europe that was integral part of Roman Empire, and therefore I feel very proud of that Roman ancestry. But objectively speaking, Roman Empire was very impressive, especially during the Golden Age. There was a lot of highly sophisticated culture coming from that empire. It wasn't just empire based on conquering, like it is presented nowadays. There was the people were highly sophisticated and intellectual, and also very spiritual, without the requirement of this religion that we have today. Let's put it this way.
Well, absolutely. The Austrian painter, as he's referred to on YouTube to avoid censorship, is essential reading. Everyone needs to read that book if you haven't already. And a lot of normies, they just don't know what it is. They think that it's something which it's not, and they've never read it. And it's even hard to find copies of it. If you want a good copy, I recommend either the Stalag or the Dalton edition. Both are good. And I also recommend Logos Revealed, Zach Kidd's Logos Academy, because he's gone into the book and I think he's still doing the series, but he's analyzing it. And it's just a very great series on that book. Some thinkers that I would want to bring into this conversation are people like Carl Schmitt. He's famous for stuff like the friend-enemy distinction and the idea of sovereign is he who decides the exception to the norm. If you want to read a Carl Schmitt book, there are plenty of books to choose from, but you could start with Political Theology. that's a really good one to start with. And I'd also want to talk about people like Spangler, Evola, Francis Parker Yockey, and even modern thinkers like Jonathan Bowden. These are all some people who I think are intellectuals and writers that deserve more of our attention, in addition to even Greco-Roman writers like you talked about, Tonitrus. So that's all the questions I had. I want to give you a chance now. Do you have any lingering thoughts or any topics that you would like to bring up in a free-form discussion? Now is the time where you can bring up any topics that you think I missed or that you'd like to talk about.
How limited are we on time, by the way?
I try to go for an hour, but if it goes over an hour, that's not a problem.
Okay. Yeah, I actually wanted to extrapolate a couple of things.
Go ahead.
So number one, since we talked about the political parties, um, I can bring up some of the things that I'm very familiar with. Obviously, from my home country, Spain, there's this political party called Vox. Vox refers to the Latin word vox, meaning voice, which in itself implies that they are trying to make us feel proud of that Roman descent, right? And that's always it's actually very hard to describe what it means for a Spaniard um, to go in for that Roman descent. It implies that someone is very based, that someone is making that's very strong suggestion that, hey, like we are here for our bloodline, like we are very aware of what's going on. They're trying to replace that. Remember, we were the great Romans, kind of like this kind of a thing, right? Unfortunately, this party is not based at all. It's a controlled opposition, and they in their ranks they have one of the person that is a mulatto, and he is like one of the front runners of the party, and they are trying to present it to us as this is some sort of like based political alternative to what we have right now. And not a lot of people know, but Spain is actually an equivalent, a European equivalent of California. So what Spain is in Europe, it's exactly what California is in the United States. If you look at the maps, both of United States and of Europe, you'll quickly notice that they are even in the same position. It's southwestern tip of the country. Well, for United States, and in case of Europe, of the continent, right? So we are pretty much the same location. Very similar climate too. It's a very warm climate in Spain. There's a lot of deserts there, something that is usually not associated with Europe. And unfortunately, politically speaking, it is completely destroyed. It has been completely Judified. And by the way, I do apologize. I think I should ask you for words to avoid in order to pass the YouTube censorship. It's my first time, doing live on YouTube.
You haven't done anything wrong. If this show gets my channel nuked, it's worth it, honestly, to have this conversation.
You can always beep it, You can always just, I don't know, put some honk sign or something if I'm using some forbidden words for YouTube. But anyway, I would say that Spain is, without a doubt, the worst country when it comes to the political situation. Our people are completely brainwashed when it comes to our people as a whole, obviously, right? Collectively speaking, they would be an equivalent of California. They are race blind. They are accepting of all the sexual degeneracies. They are very left-wing when it comes to the economy. They think that communism is something that will save the world. Literally, I remember a lot of my of people my age back when I was a kid, for instance, they would just openly proclaim that communism will save the world. So they are very, very, very destroyed by this whole system. Spain is not well. Fortunately, there are just like in
within that modern generations. Like there are some people that are the exact opposite of this whole ideology, and there is a chance that they're within the new generations of Spaniards, they will be able to collectivize and do something meaningful. But overall, it's not looking well. And then there's a very current situation going on in Poland. Actually, there is a big fight for who is going to run for the presidential campaign. So when it comes to political scene in Poland, I think it's also something that we need to pay close attention to, just like we should to any of the white country. So they have pretty much the two-party system. In practice, they were trying to achieve that two-party system by having one party that is an equivalent of the Democrats in the United States, and the other party that is an equivalent of Republicans in the United States, meaning that they are very pro-Jewish, very Zionist, but they are playing this role of being conservative and then Christian and so on, right? And they were in power for 8 years in Poland, and during that time, that supposedly right-wing conservative party, supposedly, their name is Law and Justice, which is funny because in Polish their acronym is PIS, PIS. They were responsible for bringing a lot of brown invaders into Poland in a very sneaky way, legally, claiming that they just need more people to do the Uber work for Uber, or work for Uber Eats, things like that, right? For those global mega corporations that are now being injected into every single one of those small European countries, or just and they are importing all those invaders. So they are being granted legal status under the ruleship of that supposedly right-wing party, right? So they have some controlled, tasked individuals within that party that are being portrayed as based all around the internet, but they are not. They are just playing the role, but in reality, they are working for the same master, and they will never dare to say anything about the Jews. However, there is this one smaller party called Konfederacja. I think it's becoming pretty popular all over the internet. And within that party, there is this individual, Gregory Brown. I'm pretty sure you're familiar with this individual. He is very famous for putting out the fire straight from hell from that Hanukkah in the Polish parliament.
Yes, I remember that.
So this individual now is running for the presidency in Poland. And he's part of the smaller party Konfederacja. But what turns out is that party Konfederacja itself is a confederation of three smaller parties. Only one of those parties is actually based, that is not afraid to speak out against the Jewish supremacy. And that party is precisely the party of Gregory Brown. The name of that party is Korona, which means crown in Polish. And they were part of that confederation called Konfederacja. So we see on that example how difficult it is to actually have a base political party, because not only you have to rely on this third party that is really small, they themselves have to consist of three different political parties in order to have any political success, right? They have to unite. And only one of those components of that party that is part of this bigger thing is actually based. So we're talking about fraction of a fraction, right? And I think that this is a really good example of how hard it is really to have any meaningful number within the modern politics.
Very interesting. I personally am a lot less familiar with Spanish and then Polish politics as compared to the Anglosphere and countries like Germany in continental Europe. But yeah, that's a problem we'll need to solve. Is when only one of these parties within Confederatia is based, we'll have to turn that around. And I think that's what the role of a vanguard is. Going back to the theme of this episode, is we're a group of people who lead the charge in new developments, and we lead the way for others. We're leaders. And that means we won't have the biggest numbers, but we'll have the biggest courage, and I think that'll carry the day. And I know we'll win. I'm a big proponent of white pilling on this channel. So
absolutely, there's no doubt that we will win.
Tonitrus, this has been an absolutely fantastic discussion. Would you like to shill your work for anyone who may not be familiar with you?
And likewise, brother. Absolutely. So I'm streaming on the 3 different platforms. So one is Odyssey. The other is the new platform that is called FTJ, ftjmedia.com. And the third one is Rumble. I stream there live. I'm pretty fresh to streaming. And you can find me there under my name, Tonitrus. I believe my handle name on some of those platforms is this precise name spelled with the V instead of U, just because this name was taken, sadly. You can find me on X, Tonitrus Romanus, spelled together. It's Tonitrus Romanus. That's probably the most important platform to get in touch with right now. Just like we were talking about before, right? So there's still a lot of freedom of speech on X. So let's use it to our advantage. And also, you can find me on YouTube. I am planning to start streaming as well. I just was too afraid to touch on any subject in here, just because I know how censorship is wild, and but now I see that it's possible. So in the near future, hopefully, I will also start streaming on YouTube.
Yeah, I have no idea if this stream will get nuked or not, but I don't care. It was definitely worth having. So thank you for coming on, Tonitrus. This has been an absolutely great discussion. Everyone should go follow your work. As for myself, I would encourage everyone to follow me on Twitter too. I have like 7 times the amount of YouTube subscribers as I do Twitter followers, which is rather strange. And some other news for the channel is I'll have some Substack content coming out, and I'm working on getting some content uploaded to platforms like Odyssey. I want to expand my reach. I'm just still in the process of working on that. So thank you all for listening. Thank you to our guest, Tonitrus, for coming on. And I will see you all on the next stream.